Okay, well, welcome everybody to another episode of Techman Talks Dynamics. Got Liz and James as the usual contributors to the podcast, but we're also really pleased to have Soren join us today. Soren, I think from your LinkedIn profile at least, you are a product manager at Microsoft around the BCE platform. Is that correct?
That is right.
Uh,
So a product manager in the engineering team building this product that we all love.
Okay, perfect. So we're really pleased to have Soren join us today. We reached out, we had some great feedback when we had Kenny on the podcast earlier in the year. And with the advent of the next release of BC just around the corner, we're recording this on the last week of September. So we're really close to having the availability of that in general. Availability. We thought we'd get Soren on to talk on one specific element of what is coming over the next few months, and that's the payables agent. We've dealt with agents before in a high level on the podcast, but never had someone with the experience and the effort that's gone in to get this into the product. So we're really looking forward to going down that route. So I don't know if you want to, is there anything you want to do in terms of introducing yourself, or are you happy just for us to dive straight in and start chatting about the agent?
Well, let's just jump straight in. I mean, I can maybe just add I've been at Microsoft for almost 10 years now and have 29 years in the industry in various ERPs, before that at the customer side and the partner side as self-employed and so on before joining Microsoft. So a bit all round from my side. But yeah, let's jump in.
Let's jump in. Okay, well, that's the idea of the content. So I think maybe start with a high level overview of what is this payable agent. I think we've been talking about agents quite a lot on the podcast, so people understand that this is normally an AI agent that has a particular role to do, a particular job to do, rather than the chatbots that we're used to with ChatGPT and Copilot, where we can ask it and get all different responses. So an agent is something that has a particular job to do. You've been working really heavily on the payables agent. So what's that all about?
That's right. It's right that agents in this sense have a certain task to perform or cover a certain business area or a certain realm within the business or room of the house, if you will, or even cross rooms of the house could be as well. So the need for the payables agent we saw rising from the fact that any customer works with accounts payable, and as one partner slash end customer put it on LinkedIn a few months ago, if you get your accounts payables wrong, there'll be so many downstream side effects, like your P&L won't be of good quality. You'll make poor business decisions because you can't do your financial analysis and so on. So there's just so many things you need to get right when you register vendor invoices, for example. And this is where the payables agent sort of kicks in. So also because this is often a very sort of time consuming aspect of running a business, and no one really thinks it's fun. It's like doing the dishes, like registering invoices. It's not fun. I can't say if there's an accountant out there who thinks it's fun, but that's our thesis, that no one wants to do this. And we can see this confirmed by even the number of AP automation solutions you find out there for Business Central and for other ERPs. We've been trying to tackle this before this process, 10-ish years ago, where we built the integration to the Kofax OCR service and so on, but we never really got it to do it in a nice way that was easy to set up and use. And so with AI, we now sort of open the door to a new set of technologies that can enable this for us. So basically, what we sort of framed the payables agent as the first line of defense against poor quality data, because really it should help users, the accountants, with getting the quality right, like making sure that you code up the invoices correctly, as they say in the US, that you register invoices correctly, you put on the right dimension codes, you make sure that you catch deferral scenarios and whatever is needed on a specific vendor invoice. So the payables agent intends to be an end-to-end solution for managing vendor invoices, all the way from sourcing them from whatever source, email, e-invoices, what have you, and all the way to final approval and posting, and maybe even as far as generating the payment suggestions. And then after that, because we don't at least in terms of standard functionality, cover the bank integration, then obviously we can't go that far, and probably want a human in there as well to make sure that that happens. When I say that, that's not to be misinterpreted as we want to cut out the human in this entire process. We designed this to be configurable where you want humans in the loop in this process. And that will depend on the individual company, how ready they are to dial up the autonomy on these processes. So yeah, basically the agent is intended to sort of help you with vendor invoice management, including everything in that with matching with purchase orders and so on.
I think it's great that
So
you've got that ability, as you just said, to dial the human in. I think people are still quite cautious about how agents are going to work and AI in general. So to give people they have the ability to work how they want this, to build up their confidence in the agent and know that they're not reliant on it 100% right to begin with. And it's quite neat for
Yeah.
people to have.
I mean, I always now try and encourage customers to have a proper purchase order process so that tools like this do the matching, because actually there's no point in having a purchase invoice approval process because it's probably too late. You've had the goods, someone signed for them by that point. So if you get the purchase order process right, then tools like this can kick in and it can do the matching, and it's already almost approved. And therefore, like you say, you only spit out the exceptions, the ones where the ordered price doesn't match the invoice price, and so on. And of course, it's an area that's massively prone to error, miscoding, or transposing numbers wrong. That
But
you
let's
take that element of human error away.
let's give Soren some plaudits here, because I think one things I think he identified earlier is that you've got the data there, and because organisations are paying for a purchase invoice, it's cash out. They're very passionate about it being accurate.
Yeah.
So there isn't a more accurate pot of data to learn from. And I trained in this area. Soren, put purchase invoice on, and they go, "What should we code this to?" Well, what did you code the last one to that you had for this? And so going back, and that's some of the logic that you've now got the tool set to be able to learn, find that historical information and use it in the new what you're doing now. So I think that's really all the stars have aligned here, haven't they?
that's exactly right. And in fact, matching with history in your company is one of the key, it's one of the cornerstones of what the agent is able to do these days.
Yes.
And these days we're improving how we do that sort of historical matching. So when you have an invoice coming in with a number of lines on it, each line we will try to sort of match that with some history, and we'll do that with all kinds of AI bells and whistles in terms of finding context on the invoice. Like if this was a bill from an electrician, is this a bill where the electrician switched a few light bulbs in the office, or was it from the same electrician a bill that where they did some service maintenance on a machine at the warehouse? So ideally, we would be smart enough to know, even though it's the same vendor, seemingly same invoice line, but there might be something else giving it away what this invoice is about. So knowing the difference between those two and how
Yeah.
they might need to be coded up differently, that's the level of distinction we'd like to be able to go to with the invoice.
And did you say it could pick up deferrals as well? So if you've
Yeah.
got date ranges on the invoice, it could pick up that as well.
Yeah, exactly. So it can look for things that says subscription, things that has a service period,
Good.
things that has from and to date, or annual renewal, like stuff of that sounds like something that you pay advance of 12 months or whatever, and it will actually try to find. I mean, we've seen great use cases where it says annual subscription, and it would automatically pick up if you have a deferral template that says 12M or 1Y. So
Yeah.
it will know. And that's just the power of LLMs these days. And it's super good at sort of picking up those signals. Oh, this is probably a deferral. So it will add the deferral code to the invoice line, and it will describe in a small notification why. Why do I think this deferral code is a good match here? So that's one of the new things we've added. So these explanations, the agent's reasoning that helps sort of incur trust and transparency.
I think so when you go through this development process, how do you test something like this? How do you make sure that the accuracy is good enough to release as a product?
Excellent question, because this is, of course, something that is changing these days.
Yeah.
In the pre-AI era, and I mean pre-LM era, as we know right now, we know for a few years, you could test something and the test result was sort of binary. It works or it doesn't. Right now, that's not always the case. In some cases it is, but not always. Meaning we and anyone who builds AI sort of push the cognitive load of assessing whether it's right or not to the customer, to the user. So they decide if this was a good result or not. You've seen that when you work with like just ChatGPT or Copilot,
Yeah.
whatever. Like you suddenly have to be the one who tells Copilot, is this right or not? And hopefully it will pick up if you say no, it's not, like thumbs down. So that's part of the equation. So reacting to the actual feedback from users in what they do when they see the result. But of course, so that's what we sort of refer to as evals. Like that's a term now where you react to and you learn over time. If we tweak something in an algorithm, how will that affect how many times a user was happy enough with the invoice line, for example? They didn't change anything on the invoice line. Maybe that's a signal to us that they're happy with it. Our proposal was good enough. If they change something, maybe that's a signal that something's not right. We can't see what they changed because that's customer data, but we can see they changed something. So we can see that deferral code. If they change that to something, then that's a signal that our way of proposing deferral codes might not be good enough if they reach a certain threshold. But before it comes to that, before it hits the customer's tenants, we of course need to test it with some base data that we have. So we load a bunch of invoices in that we sort of simulate and see for this invoice, we expect it to be able to suggest a deferral scenario, for example. If it doesn't, it won't fly. So we have a bunch of tests that we do, but obviously only to a certain extent, because end of the day, it depends on the actual data you send to it and you give it. So because we don't know necessarily what the customer's data looks like, we only have our own sort of base data and Kronos data. There's a limit to how much we can test, but we have fairly rigorous tests schemes that we need to sort of pass before we can release something. We have very strict criteria for releasing AI features in general and especially agents.
So, sorry, James.
I think that customers are used to that. I mean, the question we get, when we're out proposing one of those AP automation tools that you talked about, Soren, the question always that comes back is, what percentage accuracy can we expect from this? And we've probably been confident enough to say 90%, providing the templates right and so on. And there's a lot more work that you had to do with those typically than we're having to do here. Because almost it's learning as you go along rather than you having to do upfront configuration to try and get to that bar. But I think that 90% they're quite happy with, that's a 90% saving rather than a 10% loss. That's the overall it's a benefit, and they won't let us take the solution away until we've got something equivalent or better.
Sorry, Liz, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I think James said it. Just following from what James said as well. How does this tool compare to kind of the OCR technology that we've had for quite a number of years, and quite a lot of our customers are already using? I think, in kind of layman's terms, how does this take this a step further from just the product that we shall not name that's been around for a really long time?
Yeah. So I can't speak for the specific products, but I can tell you that in this case, for the agent, at least right now, and things might change in the future, we're building on. So for the OCR part, we're building on a service called Azure Document Intelligence, that's a product team in Microsoft which only purpose is to train AI models to recognize invoices and other documents. So they do that very, very well. Some other products out there some other solutions out there might also use that same technology for the OCR part, actually.
Okay.
So that might even be the same for some products. What we were adding is that because OCR is only one piece, that only takes care of the data extraction.
Yeah.
Like what happens afterwards is probably given the data extraction is fine, what happens after is probably the more interesting thing, because that's where the magic happens. Or I shouldn't use the
Matching
word magic because
referrals,
it's really not
coding it
magic, but
correctly, all those
yeah,
extra
exactly.
things.
And to your point, James, which is a really good point, is that accuracy will increase over time. Because when you start with the payables agent, you might have probably have posted purchase invoices. We can look into that to a certain extent, but it's actually when you start using the agent and the history that the agent is generating as well, along with the posted purchase invoices, that it really learns. So key message here is the more you use it, the better it will become, the better it will be able to sniff out various contexts and so on.
The analogy I've used, Soren, is that we're almost in an era where systems are mirroring humans. If you had a new AP clerk that joined the organisation, when they first joined and they're posting transactions, they'll have a lot of questions. And the longer they're in tenure, probably the more they know, and so the less they have to ask. And I think that analogy for me is quite starkly the same, except hopefully the payables agent is never going to announce that they want to leave, and you're going to have to start again. They can't resign, I hope. So that you are investing with a certainty of a long-term payback, where any individual, there's lots of challenges that they might have that are beyond their control, even over the normal. So it's, but you have to invest. You have to invest in the agent in exactly the same way as you would have to invest in the individual, I think.
And that's time as well, isn't it, James? If you've got a new person, you would have a superior of that person who
Yeah,
might
you
sit
don't
with
expect them to go
Yeah.
100% on day one.
Which is why the first point that Sorry made, that you have the ability to scale up the human involvement here. So on the first few times you're trialing this, you're going to be much more intense in looking at what the results are, what's working, what's not, and correcting it. And over time, you then trust it for more and more. So it's a good analogy, that is, James.
Soren, this is one question that came up and I didn't have an answer, is that if that individual started, I would give them a set of work instructions for how we as an organisation treat different things and process, standard operating procedures, SOPs, that you might have. Is there any way of feeding those into an agent at the moment, so that they know at the start that, hang on, this is a rule that this particular organisation has?
That's a great question. We've been discussing this a lot over the last year or so, because one of the original ideas was, what if we could just feed the agent some kind of policy document, or to
Yeah.
your point, like operating procedures, and say, oh, this is when you have a cost for an insurance, always add this dimension code or whatever, things of that nature. So we I mean, there's a lot of value in a system like that, and you could even think about, you get a new CFO, so therefore you get a new
Change policy.
policy, and from next Monday you need to do things differently. That could be in a document, and the agent could just sort of pick that up. We see that to be something that we will explore in the future. Right now, we sort of put our money on the historic pattern matching, but it's a totally fair question. I think one of the things we're trying to avoid, where we're really challenging ourselves, is it would be very easy to go down the path of, let's now build a new kind of rule engine, with where you go, like, just think of your Outlook rules. You have 47 rules. Which one is run first, and which one has precedence over the other? What if there are conflicts? How do you manage them, and so on? So we didn't just want to have a list in BC where you would describe these policies or rules and say, oh, wait, when it's spring, you can, like, if it was a sales or agent, you could add more discount or like whatever. But we do see value in some way to interact with AI and say, and sort of describe, this is how we do things, because there will be many places, not just within the agents, that will be valuable. It could be valuable when you create master data. So whenever you create with your vendors, if you create shipping providers, maybe there are certain fields or certain things you need to remember to do that could be part of a policy. Now I use the word policy broadly, but as well. So no, an answer, like, it's not part of the system now, but we definitely, like, it's something that's cooking in our minds.
I think we're seeing an evolution of the partner role, because there's less in the world of AI and agents, that there's less heavy engineering for us to do, and it's more around the change management piece. And having a connection to being able to pull off an MCP server that takes you off to their procedures website or something like that to look at what it is today, and bring that back in. That's where that was fantasy 12 months ago even. In some areas of what we do, we're starting to build that now and have almost that feed from the right tool set into the decisions that are made by the LLM.
I think we have to go there at some point. Also, that you allude to now, you might even say, oh, but KPMG has a part of their website where they describe some tax rules for, in a certain industry. Well, the agent knows which industry you're in, theoretically. So why couldn't it just look that up? Or maybe you point to some authoritative sources that you trust as a customer, as a company, where you get that input. So you make sure that is an extra layer of compliance added to whatever we suggest. So, and that could be external sources, could be internal sources. So I think it's something we need to work on at some point. But yeah. So right now we want to. So that's maybe I should mention this. So if we just try to put a few words on what have sort of guided our hand in terms of what to address first with the agent, because there's so many things we could address with it, even within this same process. So first we wanted to address with the preview that's out in a few countries to make sure that we could get an invoice in, interpret it, present a draft of this interpretation to the user, and make sure the user could make changes, and then process it to be now a purchase invoice document. That's where the agent sort of leaves off now, and now you can send it for approval and post it and do your fine corrections, what have you. What a lot of the feedback we get is that we need to cover more of the business process. So what you mentioned before is about purchase order matching. That is what we're starting that work now to make sure that we can both 2- and 3-way match, by the way, purchase orders. So you can also match your orders that you for some reason have for office rent, even though you might not have sent the order to your landlord, but maybe there's a purchase order for it because you need it for budgeting and approval purposes. We also want to be able to match the invoice with that, even though there's no receipts, there's no products moving. We want to support those scenarios as well. So we wanted to right now, so strategy right now is to make the agent available as it is right now to as many as possible, go as wide as possible to get feedback, not and in many more countries. At the same time, we build more of the business process to support like purchase order matching. And then probably we also add more AI to the mix in various places. Obviously, PO matching is going to be based on AI, but we might also begin to consider these kind of policy concepts and so on. But development of AI features takes time. So that's another aspect. It takes a lot of time, and it that can seem counter to what you would think. Like, of course, we have AI tools to help us. So why isn't the building of AI going faster than what it was before? But that also comes down to your point, like testing and making sure languages. Like now you have an invoice in German. How is that interpreted? Well, it seems LLMs are actually very good at interpreting. Like, doesn't care about language. Is super good at interpreting invoices at whatever language. So that's nice. But still, we need to make sure that in the German version of Business Central, if you run German, like it works with the chart of accounts and all the standard data that we have. I'm digressing, but I could talk for hours on this.
You
I
mentioned
think at the very beginning of of our conversation, you said that nobody enjoys putting in purchase invoices. I bet you we could find some people that do, and I think we work with some very traditional kind of manufacturing and distribution companies who will have very traditional purchase ledger departments with people that have been there for a very, very long time, and will struggle, I think, to adapt to this change. How would you advise the owners in those businesses to kind of start to introduce this kind of technology?
That's a great question. That's all. that's probably going to be a challenge for years to come, like getting used to and not feeling that is AI going to take my job. And I mean, my personal opinion here is that it's probably unrealistic to not have AI take anyone's job. I mean, there will be some people who, end of the day, might not have tasks left to do. But the primary feedback, before I answer your question, actually we get from sort of CFOs and the likes is that they would love for these people who today spend time registering, correcting invoices, and also handle all the downstream effects of when they do something incorrect, if they could spend time on other stuff, other valuable stuff within the organization. So it's probably not that these people will lose their jobs. It's more that they'll be used for things that where they could provide more value.
Yeah.
And so I think the good news here is that the agent is going to be configurable in terms of where do you want human in the loop. So I would position this as something that gives me an extra set of eyes in this process that I manage. So they don't have to type in anything. They get the data entry for free. Then they could decide to just stop there if they wanted to and say, oh, I'll do the rest from here. But no one probably wants to key in everything. So at least they would get that kind of suggestion. And then whatever AI suggestions we have on top of that, how the default code should be, or should it be an allocation account or what have you, like getting some suggestions to that the user can then review and say, no, that's not right. So they are still the subject matter expert. They are
Yes,
the
it's not
overseer
correctly.
of the agent.
Yeah, the
It's not,
supervisor.
yes, they are not, because someone needs to train the agent. So in that sense, there will be some kind of a default knowledge. We didn't talk about this before when I mentioned that the agent will get better over time. That doesn't mean that from day one it's completely useless.
Yeah, I
It
understand.
just
So you can
means that it has other
start to
sort of
introduce it.
defaults. Like if it doesn't have good history to match with, it will go down the hierarchy and then try to, end of the day, just to suggest a GL account maybe, because that's the best it can do at that point in time if it doesn't have
Okay.
any better
Now,
data.
I
you said
think
something then that my customers are going to jump on. You said it was free. Is it free?
No, it's not free. No.
Yes. Thank you.
We have been stressing to customers, look, Copilot comes as part of your BC subscription. Agents are something where there's a commercial cost
yeah,
of
but
having those on the usage.
I mean, compared to people's time, it's close to free. It's a
I
lot closer.
agree, but I'm not having a customer to me saying, someone from Microsoft said this was free.
No.
It is not
I,
free.
I I hope I didn't say that before. No, so there's a free, right now there's a free, if it's the first time you run any agent, try an agent, there's a free AI quota
Right,
that's
okay.
assigned to your tenant that
Right.
is reset every month as it is now. So you can try some things out and
Okay.
see how it works. And then at some point you reach the limit and then you have to set up the whole billing and the whole consumption billing.
Which is consumption based, isn't it? The way that it will be charged. And
Yes,
the more it does for you, the more in theory it costs.
I think
yes,
the other advantage of this solution is that it's scalability and capacity, because most AP invoices you get a batch at the end of a period, because the period invoices and everybody's trying to get up to that month end close. So particularly things that sometimes you get the first, second, third of the month probably is the days in which you get more inbound invoices, because all of your vendors have closed their month and kind of getting everything out the door and the period closed off. So the AP has a natural kind of busy period the first week, 10 days. What this is scalable, because this can do X number at once, whereas the person can only do one at a time. You're potentially going to shorten your close periods. You're potentially going to have more up-to-date information
Yeah.
faster than I think,
And
because
it's 24/7, isn't it?
the
It's going to be going
queries
to do
rather
this
than
all the
handling
time.
the volume.
Yeah.
yes. That's completely true. And one of the pieces of feedback that we're reacting on these days is for those who've seen agents active in BC will have noticed this agent sidecar, this kind of timeline where new tasks will appear when there's something for the users to do or to look at. And to your point, James, now it's that Monday and you have 57 invoices you have to go through. the timeline as it is now is not a good vehicle to present that list of 57 invoices. So how do you go about that? And how do you go about the whole multiplayer scenario where your AP department may have split up based on vendors? So I take these vendors, Liz, you take these other vendors. Like how will that work? So we're also working on that right now because we do see like, and I think we've
Like a
made
task
this.
list, isn't it, for different teams?
Yes. I think sometimes when we have built features in the past, we may not have always designed for those, let's say, a bit larger scale scenarios. We provide, five sets of like five vendors and five customers in the Kronos database and stuff like that. But I think we're trying to learn from the past, and we need to design for these experiences. And
I,
this goes back to what we've done with the public preview, which
Yes.
was a way for us to get feedback. But obviously we cannot, like, we've had very long feedback loop cycles with the two major releases we have, and that's simply too long to wait to get feedback. So we are establishing also new programs that will enable people as yourselves to get access to our basically our daily builds. So whatever we're building right now, you could access tomorrow and see what's Microsoft doing in the cloud. So that's going to be hopefully something that will provide us with feedback much sooner, so we can pivot. So we don't have to be a super tanker that takes time to sort of turn around.
I think some of the talk, we've had a conversation before, Soren, when I was in Lingby a couple of times ago. The little icons for each agent at the top, I think it'll go all the way across the top by the time we're finished. The number of agents that I could see in 5 years' time potentially is huge. I'm hoping that agents are smaller pieces of process that fit together rather than the big process. So I think that whole piece of it potentially, if it's processing and it all goes through with no queries, do I need to see it in the agent pane at all? In the log, absolutely, if I need to go back and check it. But I really only want that agent pane to be a list of queries that I need to answer, rather than, a bit like my inbox where I try and keep it, deal with things and then delete them. I think that's
Don't you think that'll happen? Don't you think that'll happen as the product evolves, though? Because at the moment this is new, and I think it's quite nice. We've gone through a demo today with somebody around the sales order agent, and they quite like the fact they could see the logic that had been taken, and so as they build their confidence on this, they can see why an approach was done, why a response was generated. I think you said once this becomes normal, as with all IT, and with the question about replacing jobs, every time there's been a major change in the way IT works, there's been, we're all going to lose our jobs. Jobs evolve, we don't have people as filing clerks anymore because we store it all somewhere in the cloud, and the days of that happening. So it will always be like this, and jobs evolve and new jobs appear on the horizon. So I think it's great at the moment that you have that, but I can see what James is going. That isn't manageable as it scales, but as almost version 1.1 or whatever we're at, it gives people comfort to be able to track back and see what's happening.
I'd add a final comment to that, Liam, which is the organisations that don't evolve probably don't survive. If you've still got telephonists and filing clerks and manual ledger writers, then maybe you're going to have a problem in the 21st century. So that's where you do have to understand the technology and sensible pace. And I think one of the questions we get, Soren, is you talked a few seconds ago, kind of almost this constant evolution. What we get as a question as partner is, well, I don't want to kind of put lots of time and effort and evaluate this and implement it until it's finished. Mm. And that has a kind of conflict with that constant change, because they're saying, is it finished enough for us to jump on? And when do we, each client makes a decision about when they jump in.
Hmm. That's a very fair position to take, because you have a business to run. I think the other end of the argument from our perspective is that, well, the more you engage, the more you implement it and try it out and have customers try it out, the better it will become. Because we're no longer in a position where we can make it perfect, if like we ever have before we release it. But I think we're shipping things now. We're going into a period now where we ship an era where we ship things much earlier, where maybe shipping experiments is kind of a harsh word, but we're shipping very early stage features and solutions. And my personal take is that the whole classic notion of minimum viable product is sort of dead. Like we're shipping, like we put things out in preview, and the reason we put things out in preview is that that is our way to assess, have the market assess, is this something you would like? Because something that's in preview we can take away tomorrow, we can just pull the plug on it. Whereas things that are in GA, general availability, we cannot. That's takes much longer time. So preview is our way to test the waters, if you will. So is there feedback now that says the market would like this? If yes, let's get it out of preview as soon as possible with its current functionality, even though it's a house, but it only has a bathroom. Like that's like, but the bathroom is great. Like, so there could be limit functionality. It shouldn't be buggy. It's still production quality, but it's very limited in terms of scope and geographical availability. So let's go to GA and then get some feedback. So you tell us what we add. Of course, we know, what kind of business process we would like to support, but we really want this to be, it's almost like a code development situation, if you will. Not that you do the actual code, but that feedback loop just becomes important. And I see why it challenges that approach. Let's wait until it's done. But I'm not sure there's such a thing anymore as done in that sense.
It's more when rather than
Yes.
a finite point.
And on
So
that,
we just need everyone to try it out there.
I was going to say
Give feedback.
Yeah, I was going to say the telemetry. I'm guessing you're seeing the usage of the agent in some shape or form. You can't see the data, but I'm assuming that's going in the right direction, and everyone at Microsoft is happy around it.
Yeah, there's tricky things about telemetry when we look at it, because you can only deduct so much from it. There are things that data doesn't tell you. Like if you can see that X number of users clicked a certain button in a month, it doesn't necessarily tell you why. So, and we have the same challenges with looking at telemetry from agents that are essentially like users in BC. So we're trying to correlate that with anecdotal feedback. So as much as we can get of that, even one-to-ones with customers and people like you, I mean, that is very beneficial for us, and that's a place where a person like me is mandated to spend more of my time as well, to really get that feedback, to really understand the customer and understand where in the process the agent went wrong and so on. So, and that could come down to oh, what kind of invoice did you feed it? Can I under certain circumstances have a look at that invoice, because maybe that's a kind of invoice we haven't seen before, and so there's so many details in it, and software development is changing. It's a new world in terms of how we ship and the state of the things that we ship. And that doesn't mean this should release something that has plenty of bugs in it. It's more about the scope of what is released like. So yeah, I hope that makes.
So if there's a customer that thinks this would never work because I have these types of invoices and it'll never work, try it out, feedback, send you the invoices, and you never know.
Yeah, I mean, the more you get involved, the higher the likelihood is that you can influence what the agent will become in the future. Much more so than any traditional feature we built in the past, I would say. You had the ideas website and so on, but this is a much more direct feedback loop between you and your agent in your company, first and foremost, but also our development of the agent as a whole. So like usage, the more usage, the better.
Fantastic.
Soren, I'm feeling guilty now because, Techman, we run our business on BC SaaS. We're on, I think, 26.4, 26.5, something up to date. And we have a lady called Lucy who I would assess spends probably a good 50 to 60% of her time going through purchase invoices. And the really funny thing is the one that we get that are usage based is from an AP automation supplier, and we get 100 of those a month maybe. So maybe we ought to apply, I could be really evil and say the first ones I want to do are the continuing invoices for our internal use through the purchasing agent, and see whether I can map the usage through to our accounts,
There you
because
go.
that certainly takes a
That's a
lot of
challenge for
time.
Lucy tomorrow.
I would love to hear how that goes.
Sorry, one
That
of the
would be
posts I
quite
saw.
funny to turn up in Poznan and use as a use case that there were too many invoices from that particular source, and that yes, we made them much easier and much more straightforward.
Right, right.
One question from me. I saw you had a post a few months ago on LinkedIn, and it was regarding the excitement of working with agents. But I think you said it was one of the most difficult things you'd ever done in your professional career. I mean, we love showing
Yeah.
agents because they're super exciting for end users. Then the
It's in
ones that say,
sales, sorry.
yeah. So I'm just intrigued. What element of that was the difficulty? Is it you've hinted at a couple of things today? I think the time it takes to get that back. Was there anything particular that was you found frustrating?
Yeah. So 5 years ago, if you asked me to build a feature or design a feature, I very much, so I knew what we had in the toolbox. I knew what AL code could do. I knew what the UX constraints could be. We had some design guidelines, and then it's up to my imagination and the imagination of our engineering team to say, okay, how could we build this? How could this be intuitive? And all these things. But end of the day, there will be a limit to, like, when we open the toolbox tomorrow, unless we ask for new stuff from Peter Boring's team and in AL and stuff and the client, it will be fairly fixed. Today, when we finish this conversation and I look in my toolbox, it's different from what it was yesterday. Like the LM models have changed, maybe. Of course, that doesn't just go like overnight, but it's something that we know because we now consume the LM models internally. So that needs to be we need to know and we need to test. So the whole concept of knowing your toolbox. So it's, for me personally, it's a bit of the world is sort of turned upside down in the sense I used to be a bit more in doubt of some of the use cases of the traditional features we build, or have limited feedback sometimes, and which is the worst thing that can happen if you are in an information vacuum, which happens, which you wouldn't think is possible, but it is. But now I'm sort of in a situation where I'm pretty sure the payable agent is going to cover like a very, like it's a much needed feature and agent, but I've been much more in doubt if we could build it over the last year. I mean, because some days it looks great, and the next day you would go, "What? Like, why? why doesn't it know?" But this goes back to, I mean, and the way this just changed for a product manager, and you probably experienced this yourselves in various sort of tests that you've done, is it was also exciting to do sort of proof of concept of the agent. Like a year ago, spin up Copilot, give it a PDF invoice and say, tell me what you think you know about this invoice from an AP perspective. And it neatly said, oh, something there says support for 6 months. That's probably a deferral. So it already then, it had, like, the LLM had sort of foundational knowledge, if you will, about the accounting space, because it's such a well-described area, like, in businesses. And that's really what, like, that really fuel the optimism that we could build this. And then it's much more about what should the process look like? How do you interact with agents? To your point about having multiple agents and more agents, right now, I think the assumption is that, well, you probably, as the same person, don't work with the sales order agent and the payables agent, so that's not a big problem unless you're sort of a octopus in your company, you do everything. But no doubt that we need to figure out how does handover between agents work? If you had a procurement agent, and now suddenly the ship is stuck in the Suez Canal and all purchase orders are now delayed, should the purchase agent, which we don't have, but think about, Like, should that notify the sales order agent, hand over to that so that it could notify all the customers who wait for like the sales order and shipments? So how do you interact if you have multiple agents? Do you really care if that's this agent or this agent? Is it just a chat window? Is it like what is that pane of glass where you interact? So we're thinking a lot about that.
So is
It's
that a clue as to what agent's coming next?
No.
not necessarily, but we are considering what could be next. I mean, and
Because somebody asked me about that yesterday.
yeah, I mean, it would be a
That
natural
very
process for
very
us.
situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
It
there's
was around vendor performance as well, and kind of um, lead times and updating them based on actual information and things like that.
So
What to think about?
for me, you've got two use cases. You've got you've got the volume transaction, which the payables agent is a classic because there are a lot of transactions going through, and if you can save 10 seconds per one, then that adds up to a substantial amount of time and therefore money in each month. And then you've got the more difficult transaction. But this is where a process flow can snake across multiple areas. So one of the areas I was discussing yesterday was kind of sales returns agent, because a lot of organizations hate processing that. They get a query, I'm not paying this invoice because the quality was poor. Well, actually, you could, that's not, if you work out what the item was that was poor quality, that failed, and then you've got to snake that across to the purchase side to say, we raise a query on the vendor because we shouldn't pay their, if we're not getting paid our sales invoice, we shouldn't pay the purchase invoice for the element where there's quantity. So there's all these kind of interconnections. People, they're not silos. There's touch points right the way through this.
Well, that's where it becomes most
Complex
powerful, because
are-
that's where human communication often falls down, isn't it? So,
Yes, it's done too late, or it's not completed across the different places. But it is a whole set of actions to do, and I think from the user community, I'd say, Soren, they always obsess about the ones where there are a lot of options because they find those more difficult.
yeah.
Actually, humans quite like repetition because until they get bored,
And,
because
but that's it.
it's learned.
or make mistakes.
And it's totally fair. And I think this is an evolution. We're first trying to sort of get a grip on like those very transactional, a bit higher volume repetition, and then probably evolve more into the space of the sort of more complex. Not saying it can't be complex, because when it comes to PO matching, like
Yeah.
there's the whole thing about, has it been received on the inventory yet? Like, should we reach out to Peter who's in the warehouse, or like what about the purchaser? If we find a match, is our interpretation of the invoice then the values from the purchase order that we pull in, or the values that we have AI interpret? What if there's a conflict between the two? How often does an AP clerk tell the purchaser, say, no, you used the wrong GL account on that line. You have to use this going forward.
To
Like,
go for
there are
approval
many
again.
sort of multiplayer. And then there's another scenario that we haven't sort of handled yet, but you could discuss, is that part of the payables agent? But you can imagine the vendor in 3 weeks sending us a follow email saying, hey, you haven't paid this invoice yet. Is that the payables agent that should pick that up and say, I wonder why? Like, it can maybe see the item has been received, so far so good. But who's then holding the payment back? Is it because we don't think the quality is good enough, or like there's so many, to your point, many use cases where we need a way to hand over. We need agents to know about each other, so they know what, hey, I'm the payables agent. I know what this other agent is supposed to do. And then you mentioned MCP, James. That's also where MCP comes in, or could come in. So there's so many things flying around at the same time. I don't want to.
I mean, what you've done, you had to start somewhere, and you look, the secret sauce that's made Business Central successful for forevermore is the fact that the flexibility of it does so much, and if you as an organization needed to do a bit more, so the data I'm waiting for is when the toolkit behind the agents gets available for us to customize and amend and put customer and vertical specific process into it, because I think that's what always has made Business Central successful in whichever market, and it will be the same with agents. And completely get that you've had to build the toolkit and make sure the toolkit is complete by building an agent that uses that toolkit, but it's both are important.
I agree. And you mentioned something that is, I've used this term before, but I don't mean this in a serious way, but kind of a half joking way. But as a product, you could look at that product and say it has sort of an identity crisis, because sometimes it wants to be a platform, sometimes it wants to be an end-to-end business solution that covers like that last mile. I fully agree that we need to be a platform. You need to have the tools to build agents. We need to build a few agents that are very horizontal, that covers, let's say, the majority of customers and well-known processes. And we also need to make sure that we think in extensibility even of those agents as well. So because you might want to say, oh, after it goes to PO matching, before it goes to finalization, it might need to go wherever, things of that nature. So we need to think that in as well. And so I don't see us build hundreds of agents. I'd rather we build a great platform, but we need to take our own medicine and feel the pain ourselves of where the platform sort of falls short when we build it. And that's what we're also doing with the payables agent.
Exciting times.
Perfect.
Lovely.
Okay.
I think the time's almost up, Liam, and I think we should call it a day there. But Soren, I've really enjoyed the chat, regardless of the podcast. Thank you for coming and spending time talking to us. It's always good.
Yeah, appreciate it.
inviting me.
Thank you, having us. I mean, if anybody is interested, there's the official Business Central YouTube channel's got loads of content on there. I think Soren's contributed to that. It's in a couple of his videos about the payables agent. If you need some more information around that, we've obviously got a few podcasts, but there's a lot of stuff on the official channel. There's a good little playlist around either what's cooking with Business Central and what's under the hood, depending on what level of technicality you want to go down to. So if you are interested, go look at that. And I think the other takeaway is try this out, right? Anyone who's on Business Central now, go and have a play with it and see what you make of it. And
at least in your sandbox. Yes.
At least in your sandbox, yeah.
I think that's the true proof, Soren, of when they enable it in production. But hopefully you're getting thousands of sandboxes firing up and setting the agent active.
Yeah, it's always great to have the feedback from your side as well. Sorry, I know we're coming at it from a partner point of view.
Thank you.
So really appreciate you taking the time. No doubt it's incredibly busy here with what you're doing at this moment, with everything coming up in the autumn. But I really appreciate you finding an hour for us today to sit down and go through the agent.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks again, and James, Liz, always thank you for joining, and thank you for everyone who's watched this. And we'll see you all soon on Tech Man Talks Dynamics.